people on the right wearing guns on their shirts and saying
But
protect
the
our
right
freedoms.
isn't assassinating people, Brian. That's the
But
difference.
no, that
These
is not true,
whataboutisms
though.
are so
That is
false.
untrue.
It
This
is not
isn't just a
untrue.
left issue.
When was the last time, other than the El Paso situation that Sit Rep mentioned before,
Minnesota.
The
the Minnesota?
Minnesota.
Minnesota. That
Okay,
happened a couple
but
months ago.
There's plenty.
but hang on.
I could list
Most
a handful.
recently, the Covenant School shooting in Nashville, Tennessee, where a trans activist killed children. And then recently at the Annunciation Catholic Church, where a trans activist killed children. And today, arguably, we're finding out that yesterday, the person who assassinated Charlie Kirk was, again, another trans activist. So while you're talking about one-offs of conservatives for different reasons, potentially committing
Wait.
violence,
We
this is a
don't know if the
consistent
person we don't
trend.
know if the person was a trans activist. That's
They
irresponsible,
put it
David.
on their ammunition, Brian.
We don't. That is the FBI didn't release that material. Steven Crowder said
The
that
Wall
somebody sent
Street
it to him.
Journal released it.
There's no official word that this was actually inscribed on the bullets. So I mean, until we get that, I think it's irresponsible to blame somebody that was trans or a trans activist.
Okay. Continue. You can continue, Brian.
No, I mean, I could list numerous people who have attacked people on the left, just like people attack people on the right for political reasons. Like it's not a one-sided thing, and I think it's doing a disservice to everybody to pretend that it is. Both sides have extremes. Both sides attack people. If you want to look at my inbox and see people threatening to murder my kids, then I would be more than happy to show that to you. So don't pretend that this is a one-sided issue.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that the entire issue of political violence and threats and the tone and rhetoric and the tenor in the United States isn't bad. I'm not suggesting that. Trust me, everybody I know has had. I've had friends,
So
but here's the
David, I
thing.
mean, at least we saw so Allen, Texas mass shooting, May 2023. Jacksonville, Florida, bus supermarket mass shooting, August 2023. Dayton, Ohio, Walmart incident, November 2023. In 2024, there was 13 extremist-related deaths in 2024 across 11 separate incidents, according to the ADL. Historical examples, we have the 2018 Tree of Life synagogue shooting, obviously the 2015 Charleston AME church shooting, 2019 El Paso shooting. So there are ample examples. Now, I would agree with you that we're seeing an increase from left leaning, specifically targeting churches and institutions. That's why we're highlighting. But if you look at the aggregate, there has been a significant increase from the left in the last year. I would agree with you. And again, that's why we have to study domestic terrorism significantly, and we need to stop labeling it from a political lens, but to ignore the absolute mass shootings and targeted shootings that have happened that have impacted communities. As I said, the El Paso shooting, I lived in El Paso. My wife and kids were in that Walmart 12 hours before. If the shooter went 12 hours earlier, my kids were in there. The Buffalo shooting, the video's out there. The guy uploaded it, and it was he literally goes out there. He finds a white person. He points the gun, and he says, "I'm sorry." Then goes and starts shooting African Americans in the video. Right? I agree with you, David. I agree with you that the domestic terrorism aspect is important, and it's part of the conversation that needs to be had. But when we're analyzing, and I agree with you that we have seen a significant increase, and I frame it as left wing. Now it could be because of trans, and and the shooting and all that. That's fine. But when what Brian is saying is in the overall construct of analyzing it, and the Minnesota shooting, the problem is, and the incident with Nancy Pelosi's husband, is that it either gets deflected, diminished, or outright rejected in the political construct of what leanings it has, and it became too sensitive. And that's why we haven't been able to analyzing it. And now we're seeing this from left-leaning organizations, left-leaning individuals, but we don't have the infrastructure in place from a law enforcement perspective to address it. Because, David, you're right, we do have it for Islamic terrorism. That's why, for example, when a synagogue shooting happens, okay, was this person a neo-Nazi, or was it somebody who's been radicalized by ISIS? Because the problem is, if it's been radicalized by ISIS, it's to your point, David, guess what they can do? They can tie it to foreign terrorism, and it broadens the authorities. For constitutional reasons, we cannot do that in the United States. And that is a legitimate constitutional debate that we should have. in the domestic sense because of the free speech in the United States. And that's why when people say this is a slippery slope. But the reason why, when there's foreign, and it can go back to, for example, now that the Trump administration has expanded cartels to be foreign terrorist organizations, if a member conducts an act of violence, let's say he resists arrest and he's a Sinaloa cartel member, they can now up, he was a member of a foreign terrorist organization, broadening that out. We don't do that for domestic terrorism. We don't. So we can have the policy debate about it, but then there's a question about constitution and how it's framed and everything. And I think that's the fundamental difference. Because when a neo-Nazi shoots up a synagogue, it's domestic terrorism. The moment it's identified that he did it from Islamic reasoning and he was part of ISIS or he was inspired by ISIS, the FBI can come in and federal prosecute up foreign terrorists. And now that widens not only the charging aspects, the wide breadth of charging they have, but the investigative powers. And that's the discrepancy, but that is a choice. And the United States has been neglecting domestic terrorism for years now. And now we can make an argument, holy shit, in 2025 and for the last 5 years, because I laid out from 2023 to now, wide swath of reasonings of where we're seeing this increase impacting Americans and the impact it has in its communities. And there should be a debate in how we address domestic terrorism, but it needs to be analyzed from a holistic approach on all sides. And to say that there isn't a problem on one side, then now we're going to have people, now you're feeding ammunition, because I want, if it's a Democratic president and he's analyzing domestic terror, absolutely go after Antifa, absolutely go after organizations that, I'm all about you protesting and global warming and climate change and all that, absolutely, I 100%, you have a First Amendment. But the moment you burn down an oil facility or target an employee, let's say a BP, dude, you're a terrorist. That's unacceptable. You cannot, but we're not going to have that because of the political nature in our country.
And I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree with much of it. What I'm saying is, I don't want to conflate mass shootings or even like one-off sort of, uh, even if it's racially motivated people committing violence with what is becoming a uh, what is becoming clearly very significant threats to high-profile conservative voices. Remember, the president was almost assassinated twice. Charlie Kirk was assassinated yesterday. I've already mentioned the school shootings, and those are and I'm not. And the president assassination wasn't transgender related. That I'm not going there. But what I'm suggesting is we're not talking about a Walmart, and we're not talking about some of these are high profile targeted assassinations. And what makes me even more concerned about this is, and this is where I'm not saying one side versus the next, but the demonstrations on the left are increasingly becoming more violent towards the right. We've seen this in LA against federal officers. We've seen, and I know people are going to bring up January 6th and all of that, but that was offensive to people as well. So the political violence, like you said, is becoming one sided, and we're not, in my opinion, doing enough to stop it, and the stakes are only getting higher. But I understand your position completely. There's a lot of good points you're making. Everybody obviously has a position in this. I have bias. I have my beliefs, but I want to hear from some of the rest of the speakers. We got hands up everywhere, and I don't know who had their hand. I know, you know what, Mike had his hand up, I think, since the second he came in. So I'll go over to Mike, and then we'll start going around the room with some of these hands.
Well, I'll be very quick because sit rep took most of my points, so I'll be very brief. One of the aspects I want to talk about, almost found it from a personal perspective. I had the opportunity to speak with Charlie maybe once or twice, very briefly on different panels, and I didn't get to speak with him about this specific issue, but it was one that hit home, and it kind of ties back to that radicalization concept that we keep talking about. He made a very divisive comment about when he gets on an airplane, if he sees an African American pilot, he's going to be very concerned that that pilot get hired on their merits, or did they just, kind of DEI their way into the system. As an African American pilot that makes up less than 1.8% of the pilot community, I could not have found that more offensive. Now, David, you know me, you know the type of person I am. That's not going to lead me to political violence. That's not going to lead me to name calling. That's just going to simply lead me to educating. But when you have rhetoric like that, and let's just not say that, let's just say some of the other inflammatory things that other people have said, that is not what Mr. Kirk did, that wasn't necessarily violent language, but was it threatening? Yes. And how is that threatening? Let's say I work for United Airlines. I'm just using that airline. I do not work. I'm not employed by United Airlines. But let's say I get on a United Airlines 737 to pilot that aircraft. And a lot of people that listen to people like Mr. Kirk, they get on that aircraft. They see an African American captain. They're wondering, did he get this job based on the merits, or was he a DEI hire? And that becomes a problem. That gets up to the higher ups. Now I'm getting called into a room. I'm getting issued every single thing I do, every single landing. If I've used too much fuel, if I was late to the gate, everything I do now is heightened. It's a problem because I'm an African American pilot, because I'm somehow some type of DEI hire, even though I passed the same FAA check rise. I passed the same test. I go through the same yearly annuals that everybody else does. But because this one very, very popular person has this view of African Americans in the workspace, now I'm being not violently threatened, but my livelihood, if that's the only livelihood that I'm counting on, now that livelihood is being threatened. You start threatening people's livelihoods, that's one way to radicalize them. Now, everybody knows that there is no place in this world for political violence. It's all over my page. I've denounced this in every single way possible. There is absolutely no excuse. There is no room for this type of stuff in our political discourse. But another thing that I'm seeing is a disproportionate response. You look just a few months ago at the terrible slangs that happened in Minnesota. They were absolutely abhorrent. But we had people at the very highest level saying, I really don't need to go to Minnesota. I don't need to call the Minnesota governor. He's not my type of guy. He's not on my team. We'll let Minnesota deal with Minnesota violence. That was an opportunity to unify the country. That was an opportunity to bring everybody together. It absolutely didn't happen. You have a transgender person um, commit one of these horrific school shootings, and now all of a sudden they are proposing legislation to disarm transgender people. Now, I don't pick and choose which parts of the Constitution I defend. I swore an oath to uphold the entire thing. The parts I like, the parts I don't like, I defend them all. The First Amendment and the Second Amendment. So, if I'm defending the Second Amendment, I cannot, in good conscience, disarm a particular group of people because they decide to be transgender. That is a very large government, big government overreach type of thing that the Republican Party in the past has been totally against. So they're almost tripping over themselves and their hypocrisy and their rush to say, oh, now we're at war, now we're at this. Absolutely, there is an uptick in violence from the left. There is no doubt about it. But where was the same outrage when this uphill mountain for years has been going on with the other side? That's why I say we all need to tone it down, because this uptick in left-wing violence is a very recent phenomena that needs to be studied. But unfortunately, a lot of people that work on domestic terrorism have been pulled over to the deportation side.
If real quick, and this is important, and I encourage everybody to research it. And I'm not suggesting that you. I'm not suggesting you've looked that far into this. But when Charlie Kirk talked about seeing a black pilot and being like, "Oh boy, I hope he's qualified," it was in the context of a larger DEI discussion where he was saying that programs like DEI make people question whether people are being chosen by their merit. He was using it as an example that if he sees a black pilot, he doesn't know, oh, was he chosen because he was qualified? He was using that as an example, not suggesting that when he sees a black pilot, he questions on whether or not he was qualified. He was suggesting that DEI provides the assumption for people to question whether or not somebody's qualified or whether they were hired just on
But
race
how,
issues.
how
So it
many
wasn't.
how many
Charlie
official
Kirk has been on record being not racist at all and not saying racist things. There was a context
but
to that
how
comment.
many of his supporters listen to his entire interviews, and how many of them just listen to the soundbite?
So, if I may, sorry, I need to jump in. Um, we're getting additional reporting. This is from the New York Times a couple minutes ago. So, according to preliminary internal reports circulated inside the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, federal and local officials recovered ammunition with shooter rifles that appear to be engraved, as you said, with expressing transgender and anti-fascist ideology. Here's the update. But a senior official with direct knowledge of the investigation cautioned that report had not been verified by ATF analysts, did not match other summaries of the evidence, and might turn out to have been misread or misinterpreted. In fast-moving investigations, such status reports are not made public because they often contain a mixture of accurate and inaccurate information. Just wanted to share that here from the context of this conversation.
Okay. But yeah, so possibly they're wrong. We'll find out. That's basically where we're at. Breaking news. We can't trust the news. Um, but no, but Mike, to answer your question, uh, I don't know. Hopefully they did hear it in context because the people listening to his show certainly heard the context. But what happens is sound bites like that are taken out and then it becomes a life of its own due to intentionally fake reporting. We've seen interviews being edited to suggest a certain narrative. And then you're right, people can perceive that message and only get the excerpt on both sides, and people will get offended on people will be motivated on one side that might believe those sort of things, and then people on the other side who are offended by those sort of things. But it's still out of context statements. They're still out of context statements, and they can't be attributed to the person who said them just because it was misreported. But I can understand you being offended from hearing that, though, and I can understand if people heard that message on the other side and it emboldened them to be racist. But at the end of the day, I can't. I just want to defend Charlie in that sense that he didn't say that that was his position, that if he saw a black pilot, he wouldn't think he was qualified. He was saying with DEI, it allows people to think those things because of the not, it's not merit based. But anyway, but I appreciate the comment nonetheless. Let's go over to Jason then Tira.
Thank you so much, David. I'm going to push back on this whole idea of domestic terrorism. I don't like it. I think that, we do have a Constitution and Bill of Rights. No one knows that this is domestic terrorism. In fact, when you look at Butler and even what happened with Ruth in the second assassination attempt, there are a lot of questions there. And the other thing is that first-degree murder or premeditated murder has a toll of either the death sentence or life in prison, which it should. Right now, we've had an old man detained, not the guy. We've had someone else who was a person of interest who appears to be a journalist, not the guy. And now we have a couple of very, indistinct photographs of somebody in a hat, a shirt, and sunglasses. That's it. That's all we know about this, other than it is a political assassination. And yesterday in that space, when emotions were raw, I still pointed out the last thing we want to do is use this, especially for the right wingers out there and the conservatives, to push for more gun legislation that is anti-constitutional. Period. Full stop. The longer this goes on, obviously, the more speculation there will be. I think when you look at this, this is one shot, one kill. This isn't, you hear a bunch of things, everybody's scurrying, and we don't know. With that being said, it certainly looks like a professional hit to me. And if they don't have this person of interest in custody, I wonder how much longer this is going on for. And quite frankly, I'm hoping that it doesn't get into the hysterical levels of the left and the right and protesters. Quite frankly, with this term domestic extremism and domestic terrorism, it is much too broad, in my opinion, Stefano. And when you do that, you do take away somebody's constitutional rights fully. And that, to me, is
Jason,
just
and that was
totally
the policy. I agree with you because I agree with you. That falls within the constitutional. I'd agree with you. I needed to give the mic for a second for David just because I think he needed to say something quickly. Go ahead, David. Oh.
No, I said I need to step away from the mic for a second. I'm walking out of my room and I just sprinted back.
I thought you had to say something. Go ahead, Jason. My bad.
All right. No. Of course. Look, I'm in the belly of the beast right now in D.C. Ron Johnson briefly spoke about Charlie Kirk. I think that we are in a time now of political assassinations that, quite frankly, and attempts that we haven't seen since the 60s and 70s. And we should remind ourselves those things happened. We went a long stretch without a presidential assassination attempt from Reagan into Trump. And I think people just got comfortable. And unfortunately, back then, we didn't have all of this fear-based terrorism rhetoric where, the guy that shot Reagan was a terrorist. In fact, the guy that shot Reagan hasn't been in jail for over a decade and is on tour, John Hinckley, with his acoustic guitar. Now, do I agree with that? No, that guy should have spent the rest of his life in prison if he's the guy that tried to kill Reagan. I think there are problems with the judicial system, but, bringing in these mass shooters, whether they're trans or trans activists, what is their mental health? What medications are they on? That is never the focal point of the mainstream media or, quite frankly, mainstream politicians on both ends. And I think that's where you look first. When you find somebody that is not politically aligned or there is with a higher whether intelligence service or nation state. And again, we don't know what happened with Charlie Kirk. The only thing we do know is this does appear to be a professional style hit, as this person is still out there, and it was one shot, one kill. And I'm going to be quite frank, whoever did this and whoever wanted this to happen is getting everything they want, because it is across the news throughout the country, and a lot of the discussions are in the realm of terrorism, domestic terrorism, gun rights. And now that's extending from the left into the mainstream right. And I think that's extremely dangerous. And Stefano, I'll throw it back to you to throw it to whoever you like.
No, and Jason, I did put a very important caveat on that, on the constitutional, that I didn't want to really touch upon, because I agree with, there's always that constitutional conversation. I do believe there's a way you can have this conversation with the framework in mind of the Constitution and not necessarily politics. But case in
Well,
point,
let me just answer that for a second before I
yeah.
go there. My thing is that you look at pre 9/11, and here we are on the 24th anniversary, and we don't have a Department of Homeland Security. And quite frankly, I don't think that we should have a Department of Deutschland Security. You look at where that went, it started under the veneer that it was going after Islamic terrorists. And again, all of that rhetoric, full blown post 9/11. But what happened in short order? Domestic extremism, domestic terrorism, fusion centers, people that have the Gadsden flag, people that watched my film Loose Change and handed it out. All of that was demonized as domestic extremism and terrorism all the way back in 2009. So it should be no surprise that when we had our COVID 1984 nightmare, who were they going after? Were they going after foreign enemy of the state? Or were they making domestic terrorists out of housewives and mothers and political protesters? And whether I agree with their protest or their position or not, they should have never, ever been under surveillance in the first place. And that's why I want the Department of Homeland Security completely and totally dismantled.
We got a lot of hands up. So before I address that, we do have a lot of hands up. So I want to go to the hands. So I'll go to Steve, and then
I think I was supposed to be next,
Kira,
though.
go ahead. Sorry about that.
Is David still here?
I think he had to step out. So if you want to, I don't know if there's something you wanted to address him and just wait until he gets back.
Yeah, I did want to address him, so
Okay,
I will
so put
wait.
your hand back up so I don't forget. Steve, go ahead.
Great. Thanks for having me here. I think what happened with Charlie obviously, transcends some of the stuff that we see on college campuses, but that's what I work on primarily. And of course, he was shot on a university campus, doing the kind of thing that Charlie did a lot of, which was going there to debate people. And I think we do really need to look at the connection between the way that people think about things like the relationship between speech and violence on campuses, and think about how what's happening on our campuses, doesn't stay on campus. It sort of bleeds into the rest of our culture. And for years, we've had people on our campuses saying that speech is violence, that words are violence, that people's words cause harm, and they've muddied or blurred this distinction between what are really two categorically different things, right? Speaking and violent actions. And what happened to Charlie is a whole new level compared to what we've seen in the past. But I can't help but think back to like 2017 when we saw massive protests of people like Milo or Ben Shapiro at Berkeley. Maybe some of you recall Charles Murray and his interlocutor were accosted by a mob at Middlebury College, and his interlocutor actually ended up in the hospital. I think with whiplash, and we've seen things like this pop up on our campuses over the last several years. Recently, Riley Gaines was basically trapped in a classroom for an hour or more. Michael Knowles was burnt in effigy, and I think someone set off like an incendiary device, maybe a smoke bomb or a firecracker or something like that at the University of Pittsburgh. So we've seen these intolerant reactions to people trying to speak on college campuses, and they're either invited onto a private campus or they're invited onto a public campus where they're entitled to speak. Certainly on public campuses, they have free speech rights under the First Amendment. Charlie's appearance in Utah, there was a petition going around trying to stop him from speaking. The university, declined to stop that. They stood behind the event. Um, FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, they do surveys of college students every year. Probably many of you are familiar with this. They just came out with their latest results the other day, and it showed that more students than ever are unwilling to rule out violence as an acceptable means to stop somebody from speaking on a college campus. I think it was 34% who said it's at least rarely acceptable, and 15% who said it's sometimes or always acceptable. And that number was like 6%, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. So it's gone from 6% to 15% of college students who say violence is sometimes or always acceptable to stop somebody from speaking on a college campus. I think there's clearly a serious problem there. And then when you look at things like the reaction to Luigi, Luigiism, and the assassination of a CEO. People celebrating what's happened to Charlie, people celebrating, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. I think, very clearly we have a serious problem here with people being willing to endorse violence as an acceptable reaction to things that people say. And I think we really need to be, looking into that more seriously and thinking about how we can address this issue. Nationally, Charlie himself, people were reposting a post that Charlie put out in April. I think it was a poll that Fox News had put out, where, it was just a general poll of Americans, saying how willing they were to, endorse like the murder of somebody, I believe it was. I can't remember the exact poll question that was asked. And, it showed that more people on the left were willing to say this. One thing, and I'll stop with this, one thing about the recent fire data, if you look at the people who are willing to shout down speakers, to endorse the possibility of using violence to stop people from speaking, historically in the data over the last several years, there's been more willingness to do those things among people on the left. Now, on in the most recent data, this data about using violence to stop people from speaking, the people on the very conservative side have now caught up to the people who self-identify as being on the very liberal side. That's the word they use in the survey. And so, my concern is that what we have here is a kind of escalating pattern of mimicry, right? Maybe it started on a certain side, and we definitely need to be honest about that and look at that and study it. But if we start to see, the same pattern where people are mimicking one another and escalating, I mean, that's, obviously the exact opposite of what we want. What we really want is for people to understand that there is a fundamental difference between speech and violence, that people have free speech in this country, and that we need to be able to hear people say things that we don't like or that we find even, profoundly hurtful. And we need to be able to listen to that and respond to it with words rather than violence. And just what happened to Charlie is so shocking. I wasn't like close friends with him. I didn't know him well, but I did spend a little bit of time with him a couple of years ago in a Claremont Institute fellowship, and I enjoyed getting to know him. And I'm still just absolutely stunned by what has happened. Thanks again for giving me the chance to speak.
No, and I do want to go to the hands. I think college universities have always been the breadbasket of radicalism. We've seen that throughout history. Um, And I would say that anybody who has a speech, I would agree, violence has no place. But if students want to protest anybody who goes speaks, that's well within their right. And again, it goes down to that slippery slope of what is constitute fine or not. I think there's some actions in college campuses that are abhorrent, and there's some that are well within their right and First Amendment right. I take issue, for example, when if when we saw the protests, for example, against Gaza, how they targeted Jewish students or anything related to that, that's abhorrent and needs to be shut down by the university. But at the same time, if during a commencement speech, threatening students who have a sign say pre-Palestine and when they're picking up their diploma, I think that's abhorrent. So it's a balancing act. If Charlie Kirk, look, how many times have Charlie Kirk's been to campuses, and there's counter protests there, and there's people who debate him, and that's what it is. That's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And and
Protest is a legitimate First
and the
Amendment right.
violence but I would agree with you that there is this word from the violence aspect. The only thing I think the again what we're saying now is an increase in rhetoric that is leading to radicalization, and it is across the American political spectrum that needs to be seriously looked and addressed. And I don't believe that is being analyzed properly. I am very I highlighted this yesterday. Um, Political opponents of Charlie Kirk, many of them condemned this extensively. I said this, Gavin Newsom was on Charlie Kirk's show. He condemned this. I have seen at least from, some, not all, some liberal influencers condemn this resoundingly, in the strongest term possible. And out of all the places, I just never thought Utah would be the one for Charlie Kirk. That's just to me was a kind of a crazy thing. But with that being said, I do want to get to some of the hands. Before I go back to you, Steve, Dr. Long, please, I'll pass you the mic.
Hey, greetings. I hope you can hear me. I've been having some crazy tech issues. I am appreciating the nuance of this conversation in a way that I find is very rare on X. So thank you to the host and co-host for having it. This is the type of conversation that we need to have. I'm going to mention a few things. Questions, I think, orientational meta questions that many of the speakers have spoken to. Sarah, if I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, hinted at this, and you just said it. Speech is not neutral. It is not something that you can just put out there and it evaporates. It's energy. It transforms. That's what it's designed to do. It is designed to take root, to grow fruit, and there are ways in which we need to really have a discussion about. First of all, the First Amendment, free speech, is that specifically that you can criticize your government and its operatives and its infrastructure and its process and function and not be thrown in jail and or disappeared, supposed to have that kind of protection? Or does it mean you get to say whatever you want to say however you want to say it without any pushback consequence for the root and fruit that your words bear? And the other element of that, first of all, seeing this video is just horrific. And they're going to have to do a lot of mental health support offering for folks who were present for this whole situation. And my heart goes out to his family, who I'm not sure if they were there or not. I think we are at a state in our country where, my God, you would think that there wouldn't be this much for us to be that mad at each other about, to the level of talking about civil war and the like. I think that there are people who feel greatly threatened by what is objectively a resurgence of the type of rhetoric that my ancestors endured. The idea that anyone would have legitimacy who argues for um, undoing the 1964 Civil Rights Act is that's very disturbing, and not in a words can't hurt you kind of way, but in the sense that words and energy and following demonstrates a sort of temperature in the climate. I mean, I wasn't alive in 1964, but my parents were. They endured whatever was going on in Mississippi at that time. The lady who was the first student to integrate high school, or I'm sorry, an elementary school, her birthday was just a few days ago. Like, this stuff is raw and real, and the people who participated in the lynchings and the harm are still alive today. And so I think for some people, and I'm not making excuses for violence, but I'm just saying, in terms of the rhetoric people are using and the things you advocate for, like repealing the 1964 Civil Rights Act, like saying women shouldn't have the right to vote, and, you know, all the other rhetoric, we have to be far more conscientious, I think, about the germination of what we put into not just our political atmosphere, because that sounds really abstract, but the minds of the people that I and others have to interact with every day. And I think I'll stop there.
You did bring up excellent points, but I know David is back, and I did promise before I address that I would give Tira the mic when David came back. So Tira, David is back. Have at it.
Yeah.
And then I'll go to
Yes.
Joa. Joa, wait for
Look,
me.
okay. Okay, and I'm driving, so tell me if I start to wig out or something. I David, I wanted to specifically address you because I generally really enjoy our conversations. But I think what you said on this stage was, you're jumping and leaping to conclusions, but more to the point, you're putting people in buckets that they might not belong in. So, for example, if we take Robin Westman, the Annunciation shooter, he obviously had changed his name to female, but was he a quote trans activist? Answer: we have no knowledge of that. There's no even suggestion of that. He hated blacks, he hated Jews, he hated Hispanics, he seemed to have hated LGBTQ people. He was a festering wound of all sorts of grievances, but I wouldn't say trans activist is the right term for him. Right. And so you lumped him into this. He's a trans activist because maybe he was trans. So I think we have to be really careful about. I mean, everybody's been talking about this, and I agree. We need to be more careful as to how we lump things in, how we sort of say all Democrats do this, all Republicans do this, because that's what sort of happens. You put people into these baskets, you silo them, and then people get. It is not, I think, a positive way to go about things. I did want to also talk about the campus culture. Look, I think campuses right now are pretty intolerant, and I'm not a big fan of that. I think students shout down people, etc. I understand we have free speech, but I also think there are campus rules, and that the administrations have allowed some of these things to happen when in fact they might violate their codes of conduct, and they should be looking at that. But I think maybe we need to talk about that. How do we encourage younger people to understand that just because someone says something that you don't agree with, that doesn't mean you have to sort of censor their right to speak it. And I don't have any answers here, but I appreciate what the woman before was saying. And I don't like a lot of the rhetoric. Look, I'm a Democrat. I do not like a lot of the rhetoric coming from, talking about let's get rid of all these laws. Women shouldn't vote. I think it's not helpful. But at the end of the day, I think we need to be sort of talking to younger people about this intolerance that I certainly see on college campuses. And I wish I had any answers here. I don't have any answers, but I don't think it's helpful, as I said, to sort of say, oh, these trans activists doing this stuff. And we really don't know that. And you were not doing a nuanced discussion. And David, I really do appreciate you, but that was completely not nuanced. Thank you.
Well, let me respond, and I appreciate that, Tara. And I said this earlier, I think, before you came into the space. It's not so much that every radical trans activist or radical trans terrorist is trans, but they're adopting the cause because the trans cause has become the anti-American cause in some way, and this isn't consistent with every trans person. And let me be very clear: when I say trans radical, I'm talking about, just like when we talk about radical Muslim extremism, we're not talking about all Muslims. We're talking about the sects of those communities have decided to become violent. And recently, in the shooting at the Annunciation Church, now the person who, yes, changed their name from Robert to Robin, I don't know if their whole cause was trans activism, but every one of his bullets that were engraved with certain anti-American rhetorical type. Uh, yeah,
But anti everything. He
yeah,
was
no, but
anti
well,
black.
yeah, no,
I'm saying
no,
when
no.
you
Hang on,
say trans
Kira.
activist, you are lumping
I
him
am
as
lumping him
he's
in.
doing it because
But
he's
I'm explaining why
trans.
I'm lumping him
No,
in. I'm
I think,
explaining why I'm lumping him
but
in.
I think that's
No, it's
wrong.
not, because the reality is nobody can argue that Robert, whatever his name, who killed those kids at the Catholic Church, was doing it for the cause of right wing extremism. He was doing it on the cause of left wing extremism, whether it was trans radicalism or it was anti Semitism brought on by the Free Palestine people who were protesting against Israel. All of the messages on his bullets were all the various left wing radical causes. And
David, I just have to issue a correction. Be very careful
sure,
with the anti-Israel, anti-Semitism is only
That's
left
not.
wing. That's the horseshoe theory. We have seen it on both sides. And I would highlight something.
okay,
Neo-Nazis.
was the Annunciation shooter? Could you argue the
No,
Annunciation
no, no,
shooter
no,
was a
no, no,
right
no, no,
wing
no, no, no,
radical
no.
or
Well,
left
no,
wing
no, no,
radical?
no, no. I mean,
It's an
well,
important
well,
distinction.
Wait.
Kira, I think one of the things
Can I
is the
wait?
person, like I read it, that person was fucking crazy. Like it didn't make any sense.
Yes, I know.
But
That's what I'm
but
trying to
which
say.
group?
He said
But
nasty
which
things
group?
about blacks. Is
But
that
which
right wing or
group
left
did the
wing? He
crazy
said
person
nasty things about
associate with?
Hispanics.
Which group
I mean,
did
you
the
can
crazy
argue it
person
depends
associate
because
with?
it's
No,
what
that
Kira's
he's
saying.
associated with
It's what
anyone.
Kira's saying. Because Kira,
He was
you're
somebody's
cutting off.
one.
You're just cutting off a little
Yes.
bit. That's why if I'm sorry for speaking over you, Kira. You know I respect. Yeah,
Okay.
it's because you're
Sorry.
cut.
Yeah.
It's
No.
because of
Sorry.
driving. You because you're. Well, I think with the shooter that we had. I mean, if you actually read it, you can analyze it either individually or holistically, because it's true they had very anti-black commentary that was just abhorrent, which would fall more within the right wing extremism. But then there was other things,
That's bullshit.
and
Right wing extremists are not racist. That's just what the left has said they are because they use it as a dog whistle. It's bullshit. I'm not accepting that the right wing is racist. That's a
no,
lie.
right wing
It's always
extreme
been a lie.
neo.
The left wing is the party of slavery, racism. The left wing is
Okay,
the person who
David,
shot
David,
fucking Lincoln. That's bullshit. I'm not going to accept that the right wing is racist
I'm
anymore.
not saying.
This is a line. I'm sorry.
Okay, so you're telling me the El Paso shooter then was left wing?
So all racists are right wing, is what you're saying.
Okay, if you espouse white supremacy, if you espoused.
The left is more racist
Okay,
than the right, and that is a fact.
okay, David, if we're gonna start labeling, okay, I'm not trying to get into what we're trying to argue is in the holistic aspect. If you have white supremacy beliefs, neo-Nazi, for
That
example, and
exists
let me
on
say
the
this.
left. It exists on the left, not the right.
Okay, so for your opinion, neo-Nazi supporters are
Are
left.
leftists. Nazis are leftists. Yes.
So, so leftist encompasses every political line from utopian everything and like no nation, like no borders, and everybody is one and everything, and also white because David, that's okay. I'm not. You're. This is the point what I said earlier when we were talking about domestic terrorism, where it just gets lumped in the political debate, and that's exactly what I'm saying. White supremacy, if you analyze it from political spectrum, and when I say right wing extremism and left wing extremism, does not mean people on the right are racist. That's not what I'm saying. But we have always defined, because of the political nature of what they do, and white supremacy has always been in the far fringes of the right.
That's because the universities have told people that lie. And the
So
liberal
what
media
would
has
you consider
told
right wing
people that
extremism?
lie. It's
What
false.
is
So yeah,
right wing
what
extremism
is
for
a
you?
right wing extremist?
That is a made
What
up
do they
term
propose? What do they
by the
propound?
radical
Oh,
left.
I see. So
The
there are
Stalinist,
none. So
communist,
there are none.
Leninist, call them whatever you want.
Oh,
It's the radical
David,
left who
you
are
are
trying
giving
to
yourself
change the
away here.
conversation.
Okay,
Wow.
so just to make
I'm
this
not
clear,
accepting these lies as true anymore because Americans are dying based on these
but
lies.
okay,
Sorry.
so David, so again, when we're looking at the political spectrum, what would you consider? This is an important conversation because it goes to the heart of the matter. What would you, and I literally alluded to this earlier when we were talking about the El Paso shooting, the Buffalo shooting, all the other shootings that happened. If you're saying white supremacy is left, fine. Okay. What would you consider then in the political spectrum in the conversation would fall within the category of right-wing extremism? What would you consider right-wing extremism from your perspective?
The right-wing extremism is whatever the media has decided it is. Because if you support Trump, you're a right-wing
Okay,
extremist. Look at
for
Wikipedia.
you.
No,
What is it for you?
there is no such thing as
Okay.
right-wing extremism. It's Americans and
Oh
those who
my
hate
God.
America.
David,
That is the difference.
David, you are now saying that there's only left-wing
Correct. That is
extremism and
exactly what
nothing
I'm
on the
saying.
other side.
There's people who love
Well,
America, and then there's the
I
people
think
who
that
hate
many.
it. Those
David,
are the
what about
lines in America.
nationalism? David, what about nationalism? Would you
Wow.
say that's right wing or left wing?
Nationalism is another made-up term by the media to
No,
suggest that
I
people
mean
who love America
how
are
can you say that's
extremists.
made up? Nationalism is not made up. It's people who
The way it's used is made up. It's fake.
but that's like me saying communism is fake.
No, communism is real, and it's a threat to America, and it's behind all the shootings that
So
are
what is
happening in America.
does fascism? So the Argentinian junta in the 1980s, Christian nationalist military dictatorship. Is that right wing or left wing in your perspective?
Like I said before, and I'll say this as clearly as I can say, the academia and the left and their friends in the media have redefined all of these words to describe people they disagree with. And now everybody just assumes that this is just commonplace when words are used differently in different places. Extremist behavior is not right wing extremist behavior. Racists and radicals are not right wing. The right wing term was invented to describe people that the left
Okay,
disagrees
so
with.
would you consider a Christian nationalist military dictatorship? What is the term we would use to describe
How
them?
many words are you going to put in there to
Because that's
describe groups of
literally the
people? When
definition of who
Kira
they
talks
were.
about putting
They were
people in a bucket, you literally just put 3 words that describes entire sects of people in one bucket.
because it was a military dictatorship in Argentina, the Falkland War, right? When they invade the Falklands, the military junta plays a huge role from extreme levels of nationalism infused with Christianity and Catholicism. It was a clear Francisco Franco in Spain. Are you going to tell me Franco in Spain was a communist who literally fought the Spanish Civil War against the communists? David, I understand your
Let
point.
me,
I am not suggesting because you're MAGA, you're right-wing extremist. That is not the argument we're having.
but that
That
is
is
the argument that
no.
universities and the media is telling
And
people is true.
also law enforcement and also the government. President Trump, during his administration, the first term administration, declared a Russian based white supremacist group as a foreign terrorist organization because of the nationalistic, racist ideologies and clear evidence, them directing attacks in Europe. That happened during the first Trump administration. A Russian based neo Nazi group was defined as a foreign terrorist organization because of their ultra nationalist and white supremacist ideology.
Who I didn't say white supremacists weren't threats or terrorists.
But
I'm just saying they're not right. Is my point.
so they're left?
100%. That's what I'm saying.
That
Yes,
no,
they're
no,
left.
God, dude, come on. So
David, do you have any backup for this other
Yes,
than the fact that you
yes,
hate
because
saying that
I
people
live
on the
here.
right
I do,
really?
Tira.
Can I
I
speak to
live
this as
I
a
want
in
to,
person
America.
directly affected by this topic? I'm just,
well,
No, you're
it's
not. We're
crazy.
all affected by this. You're not
yeah,
unique in
well,
that respect.
yeah, I think you're not a target of white supremacy, David. Let's be
I'm a
real.
Jew. What the
I
fuck do you
think,
know about being
I
targeted?
think
Don't make
you're,
assumptions
I
based
th-
on my
okay,
race.
great.
That is racist.
I think it's not racist to make.
You
Okay,
don't know what you're
anyway,
talking
I
about.
think
You
that
want to be a
you,
senior, and I'm not going to allow
I
you to
think
do it.
that you're very upset right now, and I can
I'm
appreciate
upset
that.
because
But I
people are dying
also,
with your
I
bullshit
understand.
that
And
you
now,
guys are spreading
first of
around
all,
this country, and I'm over it, and
I don't even know what
Americans
you
are
mean
over
about
it.
my bullshit. But what I will
Your
say,
bullshit.
that your integrity here is really
I
a
don't look
question
to you to judge my
in the
integrity,
extreme.
David. I don't look for you to judge my integrity,
But you
David.
should be concerned by your saying that all white supremacy is left wing, David.
What is it all right
That
wing?
Okay,
makes
you know
no
what?
Right?
Let's do
sense
this.
Is it all
whatsoever.
Let's
right
do this.
wing?
Wait.
It's
Dr.
across
Malone.
the political spectrum
Dr.
is
Malone.
the
No,
whole
that's not the way it's
You
point.
know what?
portrayed in the media.
Okay,
But
It's
he
not the way
didn't
it's
ask
portrayed in
you
the
how
media.
media portrayed it. He asked you for your perspective, but you
And I was
deflected it
giving
to
it.
everyone else.
Okay, so this is what we're going to do. If this is clear, okay, so if you don't want to define anything right, then you can't use. So if you look at the Department of Homeland Security, and actually somebody sent this to me, and this is great. We're going to use the Department of Homeland Security. We don't want to use right wing extremism. We don't want to use left wing extremism. Fine. Then we call it for as the Department of Homeland Security does it. Racially or ethnically motivated violent extremism, anti government or anti violent extremism, animal rights, environmental violent extremism, abortion related violent extremism, and then the other category they have is all other domestic terrorism threats. That's how they break it up. Those are the categories they break it up.
I mean, we can look at history. Like, who's David Duke? Was he a liberal? No, he ran for office as a
David Duke
Republican.
advised Hillary Clinton.
He ran for office as a Republican. Same for Don Black. He's constantly supported Republican
The
politicians and
Democrat
GOP
Party is
candidates.
literally the party of the KKK, Brian. That
Um,
is bullshit, and you know it.
I'm not
Most
saying that, but
Americans
I'm just I'm
participated in
not.
the
I never said
KKK,
that. I
and
never
the
said that.
idea that
Democrats
they're the
You're
same
putting
as
words in
participated.
they
my
are
mouth.
now
Literally,
is insane
Democrats
and clearly
participated in the
untrue.
KKK.
So
Most
David Duke's a
Americans did not
Democrat now,
participate
even
in
though
the
he ran for
KKK.
office as a
That's not true at
Republican.
all.
Most Americans alive,
Democrats,
most of white Americans alive
Democrats
today
were the
have a
Okay,
KKK.
Jesus fucking Christ.
That's just retarded.
Okay, Joa, I said you were going to go next. Go next. I fucking don't understand what this whole. When we had the conversation originally, David, we were breaking it up. I didn't realize that now apparently labeling a certain type of terrorist threats based on political beliefs was a problem. So we're just going to move on from this
But let me
conversation.
be clear,
No,
sir,
we
and
can't
I'll be
have because
calm.
it's not an
Let me be
honest.
clear. I'll be calm.
It's
Let me clarify my position. I'm not suggesting that extremist groups are not threats. I'm not suggesting extremist groups aren't extreme. I'm not suggesting that there isn't racist groups or there aren't racist people or there aren't dangerous governments that have certain beliefs that people subscribe to that are dangerous. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is the media and academia have labored to give those beliefs, those threatening beliefs, and define them as being right wing, conservative, Republican. And the people have been lazy in their interpretations and assuming that, oh, because those are what we call right wing beliefs,
David.
that means everybody who's right
I
is
highly
racist.
recommend you go to Spain, meet up with the
I
hold on,
lived in
meet up
Spain.
with the Spanish Fascist Party, the Falange, and you tell them that Francisco Franco was a liberal and he was left wing. Like I highly encourage you to do that.
That doesn't take away from my
It does
argument that in
100%.
the United States of America,
That's
academia and the media defines extremist groups that are racist or totalitarian or what they say is fascist as being right wing, conservative, Republican. They blur the line, and every
no.
Wikipedia
There's a
post
clear line.
look.
It's like I made the comment of like people who do protest climate change. A lot of them do it in their First Amendment or peaceful protesters and do it, but then when they fall within terrorist attacks, they are left-wing terrorism under ecological terrorism. That is a category in domestic terrorism that is tracked by the Department of Homeland Security. You can be a protester and not engage in terrorism or extremism. The moment you cross the line and you commit violence for a political end, that's when it becomes. That was the whole cartel debate that we had in the while ago.
Correct,
Does cartels
Stefano.
fit the definition of terrorism because they're not politically motivated?
I agree with you, but just because they become radicalized and extremist or violent doesn't mean they fall. Even the environmental terrorists doesn't mean they automatically fall being on the left wing or the right wing. That term is used differently in different places. In America, when people describe people as being on the right, we use that term to describe people as being Republican because they sit on the right side of the House of Representatives when they vote, and when you call somebody left, they sit on the left aisle, on the left side of the aisle on the House of Representatives to vote. But by lumping people who are extremists that might not even be politically involved, might not even be registered to vote, as assuming because they're nationalists, racist, whatever group they might belong to, that therefore they must belong to a political affiliation, That is an assumption that I think is
I never
irresponsible,
made that
and that's what
argument.
I object to.
Never made that argument. That is not what I was suggesting. It was more from the
You
political.
said the far right is
No,
racism comes from
no.
the
I
far right. Is
said
what you
white
said.
nationalists are considered right-wing extremism. If you have issue with that,
Right
I will
wing
refer to it.
extremism.
I will refer to them as.
But David, didn't you say the same thing that
I, Sarah,
all
I really want to move
left-wing
on from this.
people are
But
okay?
Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, look, just to kill this argument, the trans shooter, by the way, had both anti-Semitic and eliminate the kebabs, which is a reference to the Arabs. So I don't know what side you think he's on, but he's taking both sides. Unless,
That's
of course, there's a
bullshit,
definition where extreme. Okay, I can show you, David.
He killed
I think
Christian
bullshit.
Yeah,
children.
He
He
must.
Okay,
killed
David,
He must
do I
Christian
be
have
children.
an
You are lying.
opportunity to speak? Do I have an opportunity to speak?
Not anymore. We can't tolerate
Okay,
lies being
okay.
told about the people that are targeting innocent people in America.
There's no lie. There was rhetoric of both
He
sides.
targeted Catholic children.
Yes, he did.
Was
Did I
a
say anything against that?
activist.
Yes, he was. Does it matter what side? He's a radical. You apparently only believe radicals exist on the left, which shows that you have a bias. It's absolutely idiotic. Even the U.S. government says that there is more far-right violence. That comes from the Transactional Threat Project, which is run by Democrats and Republicans, which show that 47% are the far right and 40% are the far left. And then the rest are either religious or ethno-nationals. So you can debate with the government. I don't think you should debate with the panel to make your own definition of what a radical is, right? Let's stick to what Americans believe in what the government uses. I think that's this pointless argument here. Right? There are radicals. That is the problem. Trying to put them into parties is the problem of America. There's identity politics happening as if this person, even if this person who shot Charlie Kirk is a leftist, even if he is a sick individual. He does not represent the left. Just like someone on the right, the guy who tried to shoot Trump, he does not represent the right, although he was a registered Republican. So stop trying to do that bullshit. You are creating the division in this country, which is the number one fucking problem, right? And then you spread, you're saying every radical is a leftist.
David Pollock is creating division in America.
You're part of the problem when you say all radicals are leftists.
I'm part of the problem.
Yeah, you can ask most of the panels here. Someone who comes up and says all radicals are leftists is part of the problem because you're making party identity the number one issue in America, which it's not. We're all Americans. You know what we disagree on, David? I know that the Republicans think we disagree on a bunch of things. We disagree on three things: abortion, and it's not even that much. 40% of Republicans believe abortion should be legal, right? 60% don't. It's the opposite for Democrats. We believe that it's not even the fact about climate change. It's only 25% of Republicans believe that the majority of scientists believe that there's climate change. It's not even a fact of is there climate change or not. They don't believe a majority of them have said that, right? Where the majority of Democrats believe that they did say that. Majority of Republicans don't believe it's an imminent threat. Majority of Democrats believe it is an imminent threat. And then the only other one is, abortion, climate change, and gun rights. Those are the only three things we disagree on. Everything else we agree. The left is not trying to convert kids in school. The left doesn't want illegal immigration. The left doesn't want that shit either. But you guys keep pushing us to that side as if that exists.
Policy positions of the Democrat Party.
No, it is not the policy position. Ask Sarah, ask SitRep, ask me, ask Tira. Do any of you guys want illegal immigration in the U.S.?
No.
Bro,
exactly. That is not part of our. That is not part of our policy, David. Thank you for keep trying to do that.
But sanctuary cities exist for a reason, Joe. I mean, we are making this stuff up. But let me say something.
Sanctuary cities because of right. Just let me finish my point, then you can do it. By the way, I put the shirt that the guy of interest was wearing much clearer in color. If that helps someone, if someone can track down where they're sold in Utah, maybe that can help. Actually, I don't know, but it's a much clearer.
Let me pick out because Shingle, who's been with us. Here, I'll share it. Here, hold on. He actually found it. Again, I haven't been able to verify it.
I have it in the nest.
No. But this is where he found the location.
Oh, okay.
Apparently, he said.
Let Joa continue.
Yeah, Urbandale, Florida, and the place is Diamond Trail Ranch is an online store, self-purported homestead ranch in Florida. So that's it. But go ahead, Joa.
Yeah, and then when it comes to the college protests, right? That has been mentioned. Global college, not local, global college protests have historically always been on the right side of history. There's only two cases where there were global protests in college campuses where you can debate whether they were right or not, which was in support of the Arab Spring, and some people will say that was correct, and the anti-WTO protests, which some people also say they're correct. Those are the only two global student protests where they've been on the wrong side of
Would you
history. The only
the
two,
global? I mean,
right?
Mao Zedong, the Cultural Revolution was college driven. I mean, pushed by the.
Which one? It wasn't global though. I
Global.
said
Okay, got it.
global.
I see what you're saying. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, we're global protests around the world at college campuses. They've historically always been on the right side, right? So criticizing them, yes, criticize them for attacking Jews, criticize them for harassing them. Yes, criticize them for that. I wouldn't criticize them for the right to protest.
All right, let me
I
say
think
this then.
that's wrong.
Let me respond, Joe, and I'm going to do it calmly. I'm doing my best to be calm. Guys, you have to understand something, and this is really important for the panel and everybody listening to understand. Very important for you guys to understand. I was in the same room with Charlie Kirk at every single one of these events. He wasn't a friend. I'm not going to pretend to say we were friends and we knew each other and texted. I knew him. I've spoken to him. People I know spoke to him every single day. We have a very small network of people in a Turning Point and in CPAC and in the ex influencer type world. This is a very small, tight knit group of people. We see each other at every single event. We see each other at rallies. We see each other at inaugurations. It's a group of people that know each other very well. It's not a huge group of people. We might have big followings, but the people that I know personally in real life from this app, these are the people that get to hang out together at these events and build a sense of camaraderie when we go out and do this stuff professionally. We all saw somebody we knew in our circle get shot 57 times yesterday, and each image being more graphic than the next. Every one of us put ourselves in his shoes yesterday. Every one of us that's a parent, every one of us that's kids, every one of us that goes out in public and speaks our opinion on politics. Every one of us put ourselves in his shoes yesterday because Charlie Kirk embodied the pinnacle of what we all hope to achieve in our respective movements. Whether you're on the left, on the right, Democrat, Republican, if you're on this app right now, if you're engaged politically, all of you hope to be as influential, as effective as Charlie Kirk was in your respective lane. Whether you agreed with him or not, whether our politics is the same or not, every one of you strives to be as successful in your active advocacy as Charlie Kirk was. He was at the top. He was one of the best. And because he had opinions that people disagreed with, somebody murdered him yesterday in front of all of us, and he's somebody we all knew. So the outrage and the emotion that you are seeing across this platform, that you're getting from me, this is personal for us. This is somebody we knew. This is somebody in our circle. This is a real person in real life. And for some of you, just watched him on YouTube and hated his ideology and therefore hated somebody that you didn't know. This was a real human that we all knew, and we all watched him get murdered time after time after time again. So understand this is a very emotional issue. And so for me, this goes two different ways. The other side of it is, and for most conservatives, and I need you guys to understand that why my position is what it is. I wasn't even involved in politics until 2020. I ran for local office in a nonpartisan race. And when I tried to tell people what my local policies are that affected their everyday lives, like water tax, sewer, and trash, all they wanted to know was who I voted for president, which I never really told anybody because it was none of their damn business. But immediately, if I didn't take one side or the next, I was already written off. And in the months and years subsequently, I was written off by family and friends because they found out I supported Trump. People I know have been attacked, assaulted, abused. You can't wear a Trump. You can wear a Kamala hat anywhere you want. You wear a Trump hat in public, they flip it off your head, they throw shit at you. It is not safe to be conservative in America because of political violence. This is something I've dealt with personally, and many people that I know have dealt with personally. So, for people out there who have dealt with this on racial issues or gender issues or sexual orientation issues, there's no difference between attacking somebody for their political beliefs, their sexual beliefs, their racial gender, or their race, gender, and ideology. It is all in the same world of things that you have a right to do without being assaulted or attacked. But for some reason, being conservative and attacked is okay. Because Trump's a bad guy, and anybody supports him, there must be something wrong with them too. I must be a
No, no, but
racist,
who's
homophobe.
saying that's okay?
Hold
Nobody's
on,
saying
Ed.
that's
I did not
okay.
ask
So
you for
if
your
you,
opinion. I'm talking right now. Shut
well,
up.
I mean, you can't just say
Shut
this
up.
stuff though.
I said shut up. That means stop talking. You don't have a right to talk right now. I'm talking.
I have the it's free
I
speech in
didn't ask
America.
you
Remember,
for your
David?
fucking comments right now, Ed. Shut up. So what I'm telling you is for us, this is personal because yesterday every one of us was shot in the fucking neck. And so we are not sitting here back anymore and allowing people to make excuses for how this could have happened and accepting the lies and the narratives that are motivating these individuals for targeting Americans. It is not okay anymore. And it's not both sided. The bullets are coming from one goddamn direction. And until we
No,
call
they're
that
not.
out, nothing
Melissa
is okay.
Hortman, the bullets came from the other side. What are you talking about, David?
I'm
Stop
not
ignoring the
listening to your
facts.
bullshit anymore, Ed Krasenstein.
Well, stop ignoring the facts, David. You're making stuff up.
You make up facts for a
So,
living. I'm
Melissa
not
Hortman,
dealing
she
with
was
you.
a Democrat, right? Do you not remember this? Do you just not see it because it's on Fox News?
Go ahead, Tira.
Look, David, I'm sorry that the person that you knew was killed. And by the way, I'm sorry even if he wasn't a person you knew, because this is a terrible tragedy and should not have happened. And no one on this panel, I believe, has said it should have happened or that there's any justification for this. But honestly, for you to sort of say because of that, we should all understand that you only that's why you're so upset and you haven't changed your position, which is that it appears to me that only there's only left-wing extremism, not right-wing. All of that's garbage. The people who shouted Jews shall not replace us, I guess they're not right-wing, they're left-wing. I mean, think about what you're saying, okay? And I'm sorry that you're upset. I truly am. But what I'm trying to tell you is your position is a problem because it's not based on reality. And you really need to look at that. And not everyone you said, it's not all right wing, it's not all left wing violence. Yes, this one appears to be left wing violence. I don't think any of us are saying that's not the case. But when you sort of when you went to the kid and the Annunciation guy, you know and I know that this person was probably insane. I mean, if you read all of the ramblings, I read the entire journal that he put out. Crazy, 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 hated everybody. Nuts. Okay. So I think you really need to think about this a little more because to suggest it's only on one side is sort of it's deepening the divide that we have here. And I think the whole purpose of this type of room is maybe not to deepen the divide because one of the things that I said yesterday and that I mean is, most people on these platforms, no matter how much they fight, they get along, right? We talk, we're joking, we back channel a little. And even if we disagree vehemently, a lot of people are friendly. And I think we need to encourage that, okay, on both sides. I think we need to stop saying, oh, Democrats are communist, libtard. I think we need to stop all of these things on every which side and show people that in spite of the fact that X does have a lot of, let's say, dubious individuals on it, that we can discuss
Hey,
things, that we can
I do
come
have some
together.
breaking news. I do have some breaking news.
Okay.
Apparently, U.S. Capitol Police are responding to a major incident outside the DNC headquarters in Washington D.C. This it's just coming across. It's multiple people on Twitter now. They're trying to get some videos of something that happened, um, but I'm trying to hang on. There was an incident based on, so there was an alert sent to congressional staff that says stay away from DNC. So far, nobody else is picking it up, but apparently there's some police scanners of U.S. Capitol Police that's saying something happened at the DNC headquarters.
Okay, well, if you know more, let us know. But I would just like to finish, like I said, by saying, David, that I think one of the values of that we can do. I'm a small person. I don't have a huge following. I can't do much. But what I can do is try and be polite and not yell and scream and demonize people I disagree with. And I would suggest that you might consider that as well, because I just would suggest that. Okay, I think that's what we should be doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Tara. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey, Dave, I just want to be real quick. I actually remember your run. That was just slightly before that was when you and I started conversing and having these wonderful conversations. But I want to caution you a little bit, and you're an attorney as well, so you know exactly what I'm saying. when you're emotional, sometimes you're not always thinking in the best headspace. You're not always making the best argument. I know you would advise certain of your clients not to say things under duress to the police because they may say something that they don't want to say. And I don't like name dropping, so I'll use the initials RF. Right, you and I hang around some of the same people. We all have, obviously I'm always the outlier, the center left guy, the one you guys always make fun of, and I'll take that mantle. But I have observed as after your race, and I think I've talked to you about this before, I have noticed a little bit of a difference in your position or your disposition when it comes to different political issues as you've kind of climbed that conservative ladder. And I see that change in you. And I see where certain things have made you a little bit jaded. But I think you're coming from a place, not from a place where you're trying to be mean or you're trying to be nasty. I think because that circle you're talking about and that circle that I know about that I'm semi a part of, it's so extremely small. There's a lot of other things outside of that circle that you are not seeing. There's a lot of conversations, there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of pain that circle that you're in is isolated from. Being a I don't know, a go between or a liaison, I get the opportunity or the curse of seeing both sides of that coin. But I reassure you, there is so much extremity on the left and the right. And I'll use a real world example. On the left side, during the George Floyd protest, if you have someone that comes up to me and says, I think we should defund the police, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. If something happens, I'm going to call someone. I'm going to get fire. I'm going to get medical. I'm going to get police, right? That is definitely a left wing extremist. But there are plenty of surveys by conservative polling organizations, conservative news outlets that literally say that members of the KKK actively voted for Trump. So most of us, myself included, would say I would consider that group of Klansmen that voted for Trump right wing extremists because they're on the right because they voted for a Republican. And I would consider the Ku Klux Klan an extremist organization. Now, does that mean every person in MAGA is an extremist or absolutely not. I know people that, for you as an example, you wouldn't do anything to anybody. You would never call for violence. You would never try to hurt anybody. You would never advocate for a lot of these things. So, by no way are you a right wing extremist. You are a Republican. You are MAGA. You are right, but you are not an extremist. So I think that's where people are kind of getting frustrated because there are extremists on the left side, but extremist doesn't always mean violence. It just means an extreme political position. And I'll land it there because there's probably a lot of hands.
No, I appreciate that, Mike, and apologies for my temper. I usually don't lose my cool on
I know, it's
stages.
all good.
But Mike, I appreciate you bringing that up about between 2020 and now. This is the point, and this is where I'm getting at. You talk about tone and tenor, and you talk about cooling down the rhetoric on both sides. Generally in life, people who know me think I'm pretty damn reasonable. Terry even said it early on. I don't know if she thinks it anymore, but early on in our conversation,
Except for today. Yes.
Yeah,
oh,
David, normally you're
I
quite
I
measured.
get a hall pass. I get a hall pass.
So
I,
now, so now,
yeah.
so wait. No, a whole pass. You want to sleep with someone. So now we're supposed to decide. We're supposed to decide whether today is the real David or every other day was the real David.
Well,
Got
you
it.
got to go with averages. I think you got to go with averages. But
David, how come you're not this spicy when I try to get you to debate? I'm
because
just
that is my point, Sarah. Thank you for bringing that up. Sarah always wants me to debate. Understand how I even got involved in this. I
yeah,
got involved.
see? Look
I
look at
got
what I've created, David.
no, but Sarah, the reason I got involved in this is because I realized in this country we have a problem where we can't talk to each other anymore. Literally, that's why I started doing
But
this.
David, you were not allowing like Ed Krasen
But
or Joa to have a
but
conversation with you
and
because you were so
if I
angry. No,
may,
just a
Oh,
second, because David is
yeah.
normally not like this. He's normally quite measured. So when you're not allowing somebody to respond to you,
I
and
know.
they were being very calm, I think that creates the very problem that we're talking about, right,
Well,
David?
I get it, but this is what I want to get to with Mike, and what I was saying is, I'm a registered Republican. I don't always love the Republican Party. I'm pretty conservative, but I'm Jewish, as I expressed before, so clearly I'm not evangelical far right. I don't fit into a lot of categories that people wished I fit into based on who I vote for. That being said, I have the ability to be reasonable. I have the ability to listen to both sides, entertain other ideas and thoughts, and consider all ideas regardless of their origin. Over the years, since really 2016 and 2020 was pretty bad, 2020 and 2024 I think has been the worst. It has become very difficult to kind of skirt that line and stay in the middle. And I'm not a moderate. I'm not a middle guy. Let me be clear on that. But I try to be even keeled, and I try to be open minded, and I try to be able to consider all positions. It's becoming, and I'm sure the left feels the same way. It's becoming increasingly difficult to not take a side. And after what we witnessed in Butler, Pennsylvania, with the president almost being killed, and the things we heard people say in the aftermath, similar to what happened yesterday, and the things we're hearing people say in the aftermath, it is becoming, and again, apologize for Ed to the way I spoke to you, and you, Joa, and Tira, of course, always. Um, it's it's getting very difficult. Fine, Denise, I'll give you an apology too, but you still judged
As
me.
you should,
You
and I
still
accept it.
judged me.
Thank you.
but here's the deal. Um, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to be reasonable, to be considerate of all opinions. And if I'm that way, if you're hearing me lose my cool on a space where I try to be measured and professional, America is feeling this way. And this is the problem. And what I'm telling you is my personal experiences, and I'm sure other people have stories. Denise has stories, Mike has stories. He's shared them. Tara, I'm sure, has stories. But but my personal experience has been, I never asked to be put in these positions. I just tried to do what I think was best, and advocate for the positions I thought were best. And as a result, I was attacked for it. I've watched my friends attacked for it. And yesterday I saw somebody I know get killed for it. So it is becoming increasingly more difficult to not take a harder position and be firmer in our beliefs. And this isn't what we're asking for. It's certainly not what I'm asking for. And so what happens is everybody hears what I'm saying, and they want to give me the alternative version of what I'm saying, which invalidates my experiences, what we witnessed yesterday, and the experiences of many on my side. And until people can acknowledge, and this is the problem, it's not acknowledged, until people can acknowledge the fact that people who support Trump have been treated very unfairly, have been called all kinds of names, judgments placed upon them that they didn't ask for nor deserve. This is the problem. The problem is people are painting with very broad brushes, admittedly on both sides, but it has been disproportionately targeted towards people who support Trump, and I'm living proof of it. Mike knows me. I try to be reasonable and even keeled, but people have been pushing me further and further and further because I'm automatically a racist, bigot, homophobic, this and that. Literally, people accuse me of being homophobic when some of my closest friends are gay, but apparently I hate them. But
Can I add something to this
yeah, go ahead.
conversation that I think might be helpful?
Yeah.
Yesterday,
So,
and
so I do want to just do something, but before you go, Craig, so I'll let you go because and we have to go to Leona because they've been waiting a lot. So, Craig, go, and then immediately after Craig, just Leona jump in.
yeah, sorry, I just want to bring up a subject I brought up yesterday, and I think that I'm going to be bringing up almost every time we have a space like this. Um, the internet has fostered this, right? The lack of ability or the separation of people from each other, right, leads to this, what we're seeing now, right? This constant thing on social media where we're like, oh, I've seen so many people talk about so many things. Well, I mean, can we be honest? Are we going to be surprised anymore when we see this? Because um, this is like, you're getting, social media gives you a window into every single person into America and what they're saying. And so some person who says something awful, or some 30 or 40 people who say something awful about what happened to Charlie Kirk, now gets painted with a broad brush, because that's how we interact with each other now, is social media. And I'm telling you right now, it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. This social media thing is great for people who are trying to have careers and podcasts and all the rest of this stuff. But increasingly, I have to say that people on social media that foster these things are war profiteers, right? Because if America came together and we didn't have this anymore, a lot of people would be out of work, right? A lot of people would not have shows and podcasts and everything. So division actually drives further division, because it creates media circuit, it creates media environments, it creates looks and views, right? The attention economy that we've talked about, right? Trying to get people's eyeballs on you. And I'm telling you right now, this does not work, right? When people have to go to town halls, right? One of Norman Rockwell's famous paintings during World War II was the freedom of speech, right? And in that poster is a guy standing up, and in his pocket is a municipal budget. And it's one guy standing up, and it's a crowd full of your neighbors. It's a crowd full of people that you work with, interact with. And that works. Okay. This social media stuff does not work. It only makes things worse. And I gotta tell you, unless we're able to somehow, obviously freedom of speech is in some ways absolute, in some ways it isn't. But I'm just calling a spade here. Okay. This does not work in a democracy. It fosters division. It makes people uh, talk via chat rooms and all this stuff behind anonymity and all the rest of this stuff, and it fosters more things. So then war profiteers, as I call them now, then gin that up to have more conflict, right? And I think that we have to come to grips with the fact that the way we're talking to each other does not work. Okay, this isn't working. This isn't like producing a better society. You can say, oh, that's great. I get to talk to a bunch of people. Well, what's wrong with you walking out your door and talking to your neighbor, right? What's wrong with you walking down to local Republican or Democratic committee and talking to them? What's wrong with that? Why, like that to me is where we're going off the rails here. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do is look at domestic terrorist events that are politically motivated have skyrocketed in this country. Skyrocketed. It was after the 60s, you had the riots. Now you have the 70s, quiet in the 80s. Uh, Hinkle was not a political assassination. That was a crazy guy who loved Jodie Foster. Okay, and all these things, it's only gotten worse, right? You are now able to go online and read the manifesto of the person who shot up a Dollar General in Buffalo and how much he hated black people and he thought Donald Trump was a thought leader, right? Or the guy in Christchurch, right? These evil people are now able to infest every corner of our society, every home, and it touches the loonies. It finds them because social media is so prevalent. So that's my only thought here, right? We have to stop with the war profiteering and the conflict profiteering. And sooner or later, we just have to say, this shit doesn't work. That's it.
Leona, go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, if there's anything that makes my blood boil, it's when label. And we're talking about labels. We're talking about groups like far left, far right. Now, many who know me know I'm a libertarian. It says it on my profile. I'm also technically trans, but I'm not your typical trans person. In fact, I don't care what pronouns you call me. In fact, on my profile it says adult human male, because that's what I am. And I am technically medicalizing, but I'm a very individual. I'm an individual. I take a principled approach to politics, to whatever. So I'm a constitutionalist. I believe in free speech absolutism. But obviously, I don't think that hate speech should be criminalized. People can say contemptuous words about me all day, or anyone, or they can express themselves. But we know the laws on the books. Saying something that's egregious, that's highly offensive, and then something that incites violence, or even that's a very high bar, inciting violence. But when you make a threat of someone's life, that's a different ballgame. That's not free speech. That you're making a threat and putting someone in apprehension of harmful or offensive contact. So originally I wanted to comment on that, where all these people are invoking Charlie Kirk's past words and behavior as being violent, and no wonder why this happened. No. I don't agree with him on many things. I'm I'm not a leftist, but I'm not a Republican, and I'm not a Trumper either. But I do like the point. I think there's been a dumbing down in society. I think the IQ has dropped. When you look at the snowflake culture in college campuses over the past 11 years, I think it's largely the result of people not using critical thinking. I think the educational system is responsible. I think people just don't know how to think for themselves and have a calm sense of self, where they don't get offended. Instead, they jump to conclusions and they want to cancel you and commit violence. Oh no, there's a speaker coming. Jordan Peterson is coming. We have to have a riot. And so this horrible incident that happened yesterday, where this man lost his life and his family. I just think whoever this is, regardless of with on this potential, whoever did it, whoever shot him, we have to criminalize the individual. But the point I'm making is I can't stand labels, and I think the American public has been dumbed down to where we think so simple, and we know the media is largely responsible for that, which is why there's been a rise of independent media, and that's all I'm trying to say.
That is a cool, interesting perspective, and I appreciate it because, and it's an important message, and I hope people are listening to you. There are.
Well, yeah. I mean, I became a libertarian in 2012 when I got out of the Marine Corps. It was former Congressman Ron Paul. I was raised in a more conservative home in Massachusetts, but I take a very principled approach.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, and this is what I'm frustrated with, and what I've been trying to fight is these ideas, and again, I'm not suggesting this is one-sided, but this idea that somehow Republicans or the conservatives are anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-this, anti-that, anti-black, anti-Hispanic, anti-immigration. So much of a lot of different political movements have been weaponized for political, or not political, social movements have been weaponized for political purposes. And when you hear voices like yours and some of the many gay conservative activists that many people know on this platform, it bucks the narrative. And instead, uh, usually voices like yours are met with hate. When I had a black friend run for office, and they were still white supremacist because they happened to be running as a Republican. Like, this is what I'm talking about. These labels lack logic. And hearing your perspective is important because just because somebody's trans doesn't mean they all fall into a category of even being a trans radical. Doesn't mean they fall in the category of even being liberal or conservative. Just because somebody has a certain social identity doesn't make them affiliate with a certain political identity, but the assumption is that that's true. And so I appreciate your perspective. I think it's a good one. Denise, you're
Thank you.
welcome. Denise, I owe you to throw it back to you because I was rude and I cut you off before and I didn't even let you speak. And so I'm going to throw it back over to you for the opportunity to speak.
Hey, yeah. I don't know. I think we've covered the ground, and I think your process during this space is a demonstration of what I think many of us were talking about. We have to be able to engage in informed, free speech, and also be willing to change our minds when we encounter information that questions some of our deeply held beliefs, which asks us to suspend for a moment being activated about our emotional reactions to a thing. So I think we covered it, and thank you.
So
Thank you.
let me, David, if I may, okay, because everything happened because of my point from, okay, I did military intelligence. I'm very,
Hey, sit rep. There's
yeah,
a huge. It's an increasingly large police presence outside DNC,
yeah,
right? Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Sorry.
tracking that. So I'm waiting for to see what happened. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a response to what happened. And actually, it's not the first time a DNC headquarters has been targeted. We've seen that a couple times already, where the DNC headquarters gets targeted, and that, I think, David. Okay, so I remember when Trump was running, we got to call ISIS for what it is: Islamic terrorism. It's Islamic terrorism, and that was. And I'm not trying to make this a political debate, but it's now. That's the way that was being framed when I was trying to make the argument. I did military. I'm an analyst. That's how I'm very analytical, and I try to go from point A to point B to point C, and I always try to be very nuanced in how I approached it. I'm very nuanced in how I do things, and I analyze it and I do it. And again, I am not suggesting, nor when I say right wing extremism is GOP, MAGA, Charlie Kirk. No, Charlie Kirk debated. Do I agree with Charlie Kirk? No, I didn't agree with that at all. Not at all. Him and I were not in the same political spectrum, and that's okay. But he went to colleges, he debated people, and there's counter protests. And again, out of all the places that his assassination happened in Utah, so clearly, and the person who did it knew what they were doing. They escaped law enforcement. They took advantage of the chaos. They found a roof. They knew where he was going to debate. They positioned themselves in a position of maximum vantage point and took the shot. Now, when people say, because here's something I wanted to bring up. He's a trained, guys, it was 200 meters. I shot at M4. I can hit 200 meters, no problem. That. Let's move that away. That's not that long, and he had a hunting rifle, right? That any American can hit that with basic minimal understanding of how to shoot, right? What I would say is I think he probably did plan this. He knew where to set up. He knew the best vantage points. He took the shot, and he took it in an opportunity where there was protest and counter protest. There's videos of people at this Charlie Kirk event interviewing counter protesters to say, we're here because we don't agree with his message. We want our voice to get out. We didn't agree with his presence here, but we're here. That's a First Amendment right. That's 100% a First Amendment right. And I think that's it. But when I'm analyzing from domestic terrorism and international terrorism, I'm simply using terms from a contextual perspective for nuance. In no way, shape, or form do I believe Charlie Kirk was an extremist terrorist. No, that is not what I'm alluding to. It's just I go back to, and this is something I enjoyed Jason bringing up because that was a factual and very interesting conversation of the threat of domestic terrorism within the construct of government overreach and constitutional protected speech. And that is a legitimate conversation to happen. But David, my counter to you was it kind of reinforced the point that I was making earlier, that from a political sense, it always gets hijacked. And we cannot have an honest conversation about it because when people try to highlight certain ideologies and where they fit within the terrorism spectrum, it automatically gets passionate. And the screaming goes away from the noise. And unfortunately, in this country, there has been law enforcement professionals who have been doing this for decades who have been raising the alarm. There is a problem of rhetoric. And the issue with the internet, unlike let's say 30 years ago, now we've seen it with the strength of ISIS. How did ISIS recruit? Online. It was a phenomenal tool. When 30 years ago, if Al Qaeda wanted to do a cell, they had to find them, fly them over to Afghanistan, train them, indoctrinate them, get them everything, send them, and wish them the best. Now with the internet, it's easy.